Hi, this is Stacia, and today's attacking idea has to do with the fianchetto structure. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this structure here, where the g6 pawn has been committed to this square, creating some dark square weaknesses. Now, this structure is very common because often the dark square bishop locates itself on the g7 square and has a very nice diagonal in many openings. But if that bishop is traded off, then what you have here is a bunch of weak dark squares in the position. And in this case, a queen has now infiltrated to the h6 square. So, whoops, I didn't mean to play that. So the attacking idea in this one is that here we have the cool move f6. So I would call this a pawn wedge. The reason being, it's blockading this f pawn. But in doing so, the king is trapped. And on the other side, the queen is also wedged in on the h6 square, not allowing the h7 pawn to move. So here we have force mate, and this is what's interesting about this. There's really nothing black can do. I mean, they're going to get mated on g7. There's nothing to do about it. And the best move here is to take, or to check rather, but we are conveniently guarding the c1 square with the queen. And now there's nothing black can do. We're simply going to come back and checkmate. If the black tries to come out this way, then we checkmate. And if they play h5, then we just come right back to h6. And we're threatening this, and there's no defense. So, the computer gives like h4 because it doesn't know what to do. And queen g7, checkmate. So let's have a look at how this can play in a real game in a more complicated scenario. Okay, so here's our example game. And this is number 123 in Mating the Castle King by Grandmaster Danny Grimaldi, which is my premier study material for this month. And this is a game between Guzia and Barlov, played in Bernay, I believe, 1980. So this is white to move, and I'll tell you this. The first move is a little obvious, but I want you to see the whole line all the way to mate. So if you'd like to pause your video and see if you can determine and calculate that line, and then I'll go ahead and step through what happened in the game. Okay, so I'm very hopeful that you found the move queen h6. Pretty obvious, right? This is a queen wedge. So the queen is stopping the h-pawn from being mobile, so it's blockaded. And we already have this nice f-pawn here blockading black's f-pawn. So the king is essentially trapped in here. And there's a huge threat of queen g7 mate, just like what we talked about. Now, what I was hoping that you would find here, though, is that black does have a defense. Knight e6. So the knight is going to come and defend the g7 square. Feels a little shaky, though, right? And I read to you what it says in the book. The knight rushes to the rescue of the black king and covers the vulnerable g7 square. But the fragile truce will be undermined if white can remove this defensive piece. So from here, you need to see that we need to attack this piece. If we take him away, then queen g7 mate is next. Okay, so let's attack it. Let's try bishop c4. But if you saw this move, unfortunately, it fails to the move d5, a tempo on the bishop, and the computer actually says black's fine after this. So we need something better. And lucky for us, bishops move in two different directions. I mean, actually four. I'm not going to go this way, though. So we're going to go bishop g4 with the idea of takes, checkmate. So now, is black finished, or can black do something about this? Well, it turns out that black does have another defensive resource here, d5. Now, I missed this in my own calculation. That's why I'm showing this. And the point behind d5 is really nice. So now if we proceed with our plan, all excited to give checkmate, we'd be really disturbed if we played queen g7 and then saw this. the queen is actually now defending laterally. So for that reason, d5 actually does give the queen access to the g7 square. So now there's two defenders. So, okay. Well, what's an attacker to do? There are actually two moves that still win. And if you'd like to pause your video, and if you haven't spotted these moves already, see if you can identify both moves. Okay, are you ready? Here's the fun part. So the first move is Rook F5. Wow, played in the game. I love this move. And Danny Germali says, a cold shower. Black might have felt that he was okay, but now, if he takes, we have bishop takes f5, and there's no way to stop mate on h7. So sort of a bait and switch move. I love it. But the other move is rook a to e1. And the idea here is very, very sneaky. So we're planning a very slow maneuver of rook e3, rook h3, queen takes h7 checkmate. And it turns out that this plan is very, very difficult to stop. Like, let's say black does nothing, and we play rook e3. Yeah, computer says mate in 4. I'm trying to find a move for black myself. Don't forget the knight's still pinned. If this knight moves away, queen g7. Yeah, this is difficult. I got nothing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just trying to get the queen in, but rook h3. How are you stopping this? You're not. So, yeah, the computer gives queen h5, which is the best move, but now we just take it, right? And then after this, we still have bishop f5 as well, and mate is coming. So for that reason, in this variation, I kind of like the computer's defense. It doesn't work, but it's kind of cute. After rook a to e1, sorry about that, rook a to e1, the computer plays d4. It wants to stop the move, rook e3. But now we can play rook takes e4. The pawn was freshly undefended. And the funny thing about this move is now we're saying, okay, good job, you stopped our rook from coming to e3. Now we're going to play rook f3. Let's look at the flashier move played in the game. I really do like it. Okay, here we go. Rook to f5. Very beautiful. So we covered that you cannot take because bishop takes f5 and there's mate. But what else can black do? Is there any other defense for black? Well, I don't believe that there is. So computer is giving rook b8 as the best move. I guess going for a pawn. And how do we continue? This move, rook h5. Absolutely beautiful. So the idea is that the g-pawn is basically overworked. It's doing a very important job here. It's defending the f5 square, preventing bishop f5 and queen h7 mate. But the problem is the rook has now occupied the h5 square. So the pawn cannot guard both squares at once. That's sort of the idea here. So if takes, we have this same thing. There's no way to defend. Computer gives queen takes h2, but I'll just play a silly move. Maybe this. That's going to be checkmate. And if you don't take, how are you stopping this? It's totally impossible, right? Guzia did a great job exploiting the fact that this kingside is all wedged in. So as I like to do, let's look at the lines one more time, just so that we can burn them into our brains. The first move is queen h6, doing the queen wedge on the h6 square. Knight e6 is a defensive move that we need to be aware of, guarding g7. And now we don't want to play bishop c4 because that allows d5. So we play bishop g4. Still d5 barely holds things together though, because now the queen does defend laterally after bishop takes, pawn takes. If we try to play mate, the queen grabs the queen, so we cannot do that. So instead we need something else. And we found two moves that win. Rook A to E1 with this in mind, or this awesome move, Rook F5. So realizing that if the G-pawn takes the rook, it's no longer guarding the F5 square. And we will play this and then checkmate. And so black needs to do something else. And after Rook H5, yeah, and it's actually after Rook F5, black resigned. So it didn't even get to this. They didn't play Rook B8. That's totally a computer move. But even after this, same idea. Bishop F5 is working. And if you don't take the rook and you play something else, like you grab this pawn being silly, we have Queen H7 mate. So yeah, so this wedge is an idea that has I have used in my own games, and I've also been victim to it. So I believe this to be a common thing that is going to happen in your chess games, and I hope you learned something and that this helps you with your attacks. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.